Hey, welcome to the Blair Dunkley experience where you get to experience me. Well, not exactly. You get to experience mind models. It's a area of my life and my body of work that I've been working on for, gosh, um, over 40 years. And I'm choosing to share it with the world as best I can in limited quantity. The fuller quantity is programs that you can take, and that's how I make my living, is doing programming. But I also wanted to make sure that some of this stuff got out to the wider world and started shifting people. I did this because I used to be, years ago, I used to be a mindset coach. And I'll be blunt here. Mindset sucks. It doesn't work as advertised. It doesn't work the way that people claim that it should work. Now, I got to put a caveat on that. Mindset can work for a while, sort of, as advertised, but it's definitely not enduring like it's advertised to be, like people say. You know, I was talking to a guy, Lee, earlier this week, and Lee was, and I started the conversation off, and I said, well, I sort of do stuff sort of like mindset. And he interrupted me and said, man, mindset is like 90% of everything. It's so good. I'm glad you're talking about that. And I went, well, it's sort of like it, but it really is different. Mind models aren't mindset at all. In fact, I'm not a big advocate of mindset anymore because it's very difficult to make things reliable with mindset. Mindset is belief-based, and mind models aren't. Mind models are identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable behaviors that you can do in any life situation and apply them. And even if your mindset is in the tank, mind models can pull you back out, and mind models can work identifiably, repeatably, and duplicatably. So that's the cool part. And, it's sort of like, the difference between mind models and mindset. It's sort of like if you were out there and you were saying, okay, I'm going to jump the Grand or get across the Grand Canyon. And so what you wound up doing is taking a hill on one side and building a great big ramp on it, and having that ramp slide down and out of wood, and you're building this rickety ramp going up to leap you over, like do it. And then you're buckling yourself in to a Model T. Okay, so you've got a Model T Ford, rickety, going down this rickety gimbaled together thing that's like 100 years old, and it's going to lift you off, and it's sort of like certain death. You may not hit the bottom yet because it's a hell of a long way down, but it's going to get you there. It's going to knock the wind out of you at the very least, if not take you out of the game totally. Or you've got sort of this guy beside you, while this other version of you, can walk over and strap on an Elon Musk-esque rocket pack, where you can just strap it on your back and simple to use, and jet yourself over to the other side. And it's got more than enough time and power to do that. And, on top of that, it's probably pre-programmed, like Elon Musk takes off those rockets and then brings them back down and lands them right back anywhere he wants. And so it's probably got that level of control to it too. And that's sort of more along the lines of what mind models do. They're more like the rocket pack versus the Model T Ford and a rickety constructed launching pad to try and shoot yourself across the Grand Canyon. So that's sort of like the difference between the two. I'd rather go for the rocket pack myself because it's not, it's way more reliable. It gets you there, and it's all controllable. So that's one of the big differences that you have between mind models and mindset. And I know people are going to find that not to be their cup of tea, but that's too bad. It is mine. And since I'm a guy that actually used to train on mindset decades ago, and my mindset went into the tank when my father went into a coma. And so I couldn't get it back. And I went to my mentors, and they said, they basically blamed me for my mindset not working. It's your problem, Blair. This stuff works. You just aren't believing in it well enough. It's sort of like faith and whatnot. And I go, this shouldn't be a religion. This stuff is not, in my mind, was not intended to just have faith in it and hope like hell it works. I needed something that was identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable. And I was very fortunate because I was working at life skills colleges at the time. And sure enough, I had seen the skill sets and behaviors of the life skills that was researched by $42 million worth of money and 5 years worth of time to take people and move them dramatically ahead. And we sort of did something rather strange. And I'm just realizing after years of saying this, it finally stuck in. So do you guys know about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, out of 80% of your profit of a company is going to come from 20%-ish of your customers, right? That's one of the things. 80% of what you do is sort of not going to be that great, but 20% is going to give you the vast majority of your movement and everything else. Well, it also goes to people and to organizations. And one of the weird things is that at Life Skills, we did a 10-year longitudinal study. And these normal numbers were basically, they had between 2 and 12% success rate in the target group. The government of Canada was they actually researched our market, the people that were in there, generally on social services, generally with all kinds of mental health and social issues, being on social assistance, having drug and alcohol problems. We saw it all. We dealt with it all. Abuse, you name it, it was there. Suicidal, a lot of suicidal, like literally 80% of our students were potentially suicidal at one point in time. And that was like about 1,000 of them a night. So 800 of them potentially suicidal. So first of all, our stuff had to work. Secondly, life skills. We did that 10-year longitudinal study, and man, we got a 76.2% success rate where people were either, if they dropped off for any reason, were unemployed or out of school for more than 2 weeks, and there were other factors in there, but those were the two biggies. They were counted as a failure over a 3-year period. So these are people that had, in the previous 3 years, the majority of them had not held down a job. So, or been to school for that length of time. So this was a big deal. And I just recognized Pareto principle. While 76.2% is only 3.8% away from 80%. So it's sort of like the 80% of the Pareto principle, but in reverse. I was speaking at a conference in Ottawa about mind models decades ago and showing people what I used to teach. And basically, if you're coming in to mind model coach training, you're going to be learning the same stuff that I did there. And most of that, which I modified into a different program. It's called IBC, Igniting the Buying Conversation. And that's another course, but the Mind Model Coach training uses, the basis of Mind Model Coach training is operant effectual counseling and operant effectual coaching. And operant effectual coaching is what I trained those people on who went to Ottawa. And to keep it short, we had 5 people up for awards. 4 out of the 5 came in first nationally. The fifth one came in second. Another reverse 80-20 principle. It's like, hello, what's going on here? There's something weird about these stats. It's supposed to be 20% succeed, not 80% succeed. You know, that's really what the 80-20 principle is all about. We're still getting 80-20, but it's flipped around. So,
and that, Blair, that actually, I would say that actually puts you into another Pareto 80-20, where you're part of the 20% of courses and training that provides 80% of the results.
There you go. That's the other way to do it, to look at it. Good point there, Trevor. I like that. So that is that's actually a good marketing principle to put into our stuff moving forward. I got to remember that. So do you.
It's filed away.
Yeah. Sorry, John?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, fire away.
In that population of people that you were working with the Life Skills College, did you find that the mind models helped people get off and stay off of substance abuse?
Yes. His short answer is yes. I actually designed programs, 3 of them, for different treatment centers in Alberta and Northern Alberta. And we wound up using life skills and mind models jointly to keep people, give people the ability to cope, problem solve, and have success skills with their life and change their life around. And yeah, it was huge for drug and alcohol training. It was huge. Well, as you're going to learn, like one of the mind models that you're going to learn about in mind model coach training is going to be the question concepts. You're going to find out that people who are addicted to drugs or have depression or anxiety, I mean, it goes on and on and on. Virtually all mental health disorders, in my way of looking at this, are fundamentally how you talk to yourself inside your head. And if you're in a why question concept, you're stuck, and it depends on which other ones. And as you know, like just teaching people about evaluation versus judgment, if you're in judgment and everything is judgment, you can really do a number on yourself. And in fact, when I work with people who are bipolar disorder, used to be referred to as manic depressive, but bipolar disorder, you'll find that if they operate in a judgmental mode, they go from very positive judgments of themselves to very negative judgments of themselves. And they get depressed, but they practice their depression, and it literally grows an area of their brain where they are more skillful about being depressed. Like you can literally take snapshots of their brain and watch this area of their brain grow over time or shrink. And that area can shrink because they can change how they're using their language, their self-talk, or it can be done through drugs. There are drug therapies that will do the same thing, but they found it through what they referred to as effective talk therapy. But all of this stuff is going to be about how you get yourself resourceful and how you problem solve. Problem solving and resourcefulness and coping are all tied together, but nobody out there yet, other than myself, has really focused in on resourcefulness training. Not like there are problem solving programs out there that'll show you models to problem solve. Not great in my opinion, but better than average, better than okay. And secondly, you'll also get into the ability to start recognizing you've got problems coping, and you've got coping methodologies and coping skills. And one of the key elements in coping is being able to describe your feelings. And so if you can't describe your emotions, you won't cope really well. You'll experience them, but if you can't name and label what you're feeling, you basically don't cope well. You tend to go into drug and alcohol abuse is a common spin-off of people who don't describe their feelings, but they also violence, anger management issues, abuse issues frequently all stem from the inability, when we got people in with anger management issues or abuse issues or whatever, their ability to really describe how they feel inside accurately was pretty small. It was, they had, you know, a vocabulary of maybe 20 words or 50 words, and 30 of them were swear words, cuss words that were different tonal versions of the F-bomb, and that was a range of emotions that they had. And, you know, other derogatory words, left, right, and center for all the negative stuff. The other thing that I found true was the fact that they had a very difficult time identifying how they felt happy or delighted or engaged or excited or felt like they had an opportunity or whatever. That part was very low-level language skill in that way. They knew the words, they just didn't know how to associate how they felt internally to describe that feeling. And that is a major gap for individuals. Drug and alcohol and abuse issues are two of the major areas that they wind up describing, or lack of description of what's going on for them. So, and they don't have somebody to talk to about that or define it and release it and vent it. So those are just some of the fundamental pieces that are there. Okay? Does that answer the question? Probably more in depth than you want, but it's there. Okay, cool. So topic tonight, be open to learn. Look for ideas from anyone and anywhere. Do not assume you know where all the new and creative ideas will come from. Involve people to get feedback, not because of their titles, but because of their ability to contribute to your learning. So that's part of what you're here tonight and doing, is you're learning how to contribute to other people's learning and your own. And that's really what it comes down to. So the other one that I just was searching on, we have a quote below this, and this one is, the mind is like a muscle. Lifting weights is easy when you have exercised the muscle. And working through problems when you exercise your mind. However, I also, that was on our sheet that we put out. But the one I really like is, the mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. So anyway, yeah. So I was trying to find out who's that one attributed to. And it's sort of semi attributed to Frank Zappa, but there's yeah, believe it or not, yeah.
Wow, he was a smart man.
And there's yeah, there's another quote that was out there that is attributed to Will Rogers. Sorry. The minds are like parachutes. They only function when open. So anyway, so those are the places to be. But I still like the Frank Zappa version. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. Anyway, and you wouldn't believe it coming from Frank Zappa, but that's who it's attributed to. Anyway, so for what we're going to be doing is we're going to take a look at learning and what you've learned. And I'm going to pick on you guys and sort of take a look at it. And Jennifer and David, if you guys want to jump on the call here as panelists, that's fine too. We can just raise your hand and jump on if you'd like, if you wish to. If you don't, David raised his hand. Cool, we'll bring him on. Jennifer, would you care to join us? Hey, David. There we go. Cool. So, anyway, and if you can't figure out where to raise your hand, Jennifer, you can always just type in the chat or click in the chat box and say yes, and we'll advance you. And so I get to chat with everybody tonight. And
David, to unmute yourself, it's the bottom left-hand corner. There's a button there to press as well.
Yeah, cool.
There you go.
Hi.
There we go. All there. Hey, David, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Sorry?
Long time no talk.
Yeah, really. Long time no talk. You bet. And there you go. We're all on board again. So anyway, so just what I'd like to do is I'd like Tim and John to basically share what have you learned, because I thought tonight would be a really good night to sort of bring people on and have them here from the perspective of just a bit of a review tonight. And what have you learned? And what are those things? And David, I've worked with you quite some time ago, and then you could share your experience of what you learned. And Trevor, you too. So we've been doing stuff for a long time. So anyway, so how have mind models changed yourself? John, I'll start picking on you.
Okay. Mind models have increased my self-confidence and my just general comfort level. Probably the evaluation versus judgment would be the one that I'd give the biggest credit to in terms of just freeing me up. But I've learned. I would never have believed before I started learning this stuff that the way you talk to yourself, the structure of the language would have such an effect on how your mind functions.
Really? Can you share that? Dive a little deeper into it. What do you mean you were never aware? You never thought that was...
Well, I've always, been I guess a student of language in a way. I always wanted to have the right word to describe something as best I could. I've been kind of teased about using big words,
right?
But there's a lot of times that there's a big word that says something much more precisely than 10 little words, and
right.
It's very specific for that. And so that's kind of a life challenge. But the judgment thing, I mean, I was aware of judgment and self-judgment for decades and wanted to change it and made efforts to change it and went to seminars and took classes and did all kinds of things and I never seemed to be able to move the needle. And then just the little shift of the way that mind model is structured and explained made the difference. And that has just been amazing to me.
That also fires into a mind model that I taught about the same time, maybe a couple days earlier or a couple weeks earlier, but that's also naming and labeling. And, in the ability to name and label what it is, if we don't name and label things appropriately, we behave to our meanings of things. And if we haven't got well-defined meanings, we still behave to those meanings. Okay, so we always behave to the meaning, what we mean by it or what we think we mean by it. We don't behave to the definition of it, we behave to the meaning of it. Okay.
As we see it.
As you see it, yes. As we see it. Wow. So we behave to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that is what you're basically describing to me, is if people were giving you definitions and not showing you or guiding you to discover your meaning, or providing you with, see, that's how come the mind models are the way that they're structured, is a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of the fundamental ones are compare and contrast. So it's going back to basic fundamentals of how people learn. The number one way we learn is through mimicry. The mimicry will only get us so far. That's how we learn to walk. That's sort of how we learn to talk. But that's not necessarily how we learn to think. Okay? So, and this is that third level of going inside of ourselves. We learn to process information, to think, by actually developing a meaning. And we behave, as I said, to that meaning. And, you know, that was like I described to you about people with anger management problems and or alcoholism or whatever behavior that is there. But they would get angry, like for anger management, they'd get angry and they'd make a fist and start pounding it. And you talk to them about how they're feeling. And they talk about, you know, I'm angry, and usually a lot of, you know, choice four-letter words are coming out of their mouth, and not much in the way of describing how they're feeling, but they're expressing their feelings. So expressing their feelings or behaving those feelings is what I saw. But the more that you can get it so that people can actually describe, name, and label that feeling. So I would be asking them, so do you feel more frustrated or angry? Well, I feel frustrated and angry. Which one's bigger for you? Well, they'd have to stop and think about it. And they'd figure out, well, I'm actually more frustrated than I am angry. Okay, then what specifically are you frustrated about? And they go, I don't know, everything. Well, where in your body are you frustrated or angry? Because most of these feelings have a location in the body. And that people would say in my gut, in my stomach, sometimes in their legs, you know, believe it or not, or in their back or in their head, you know, like all of that, those places were there, and all of a sudden you'd start getting people describing that. But when they started describing their physical body locations of their anger or frustration, the weird thing started happening is their tone of voice would start inching down ever so slightly. It's like they're defining how they feel to themselves, and they're listing off what they're feeling, not why they're feeling it, but what they're feeling. And when they listed off what they're feeling, that actually allowed them to vent, to share, to disperse some of that pressure and steam and everything else, to the point where they were able to vent off a lot of the anger stuff that was going on for them. And that started transforming them rather quickly. Not unlike what happened to you with judgment, is if until you had that comparison, that well, the first way we do it is by mimicry, then compare and contrast. So a lot of the mind models are set up as verses. You know, you have evaluation versus judgment, clarity versus certainty, you know, effective versus ineffective.
Safety versus comfort.
Yeah, safety versus comfort. There you go. Ask versus tell. There's another one. Like all of those are verses. And that compare and contrast, when we start defining and describing that comparison and judgment versus evaluation. I just was talking to that same person that was all gung-ho about mindset earlier on, and in that first few minutes, he was strong, and in the next 20 minutes, it's like, man, mindset really doesn't work that well. And I have those problems too all the time. Yet I thought I was sort of the only person that did that, that actually didn't have a great mindset 100% of the time. And he's a very successful entrepreneur, but just like most people who try to focus on mindset, they can't hold on to it. And I go, I mean, since you figured out judgment versus evaluation and your shift away from judgment to evaluation, when you start judging yourself, how many times can you flip yourself out of judgment now? Or are you still stuck in judgment? Or have you been stuck in judgment?
I'm sure I have. I don't have, I can't give you a quick example, but I'm sure I have, but I think I get out of it a lot faster.
He does.
Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah, he does. He gets out of it a whole lot quicker.
So
he recognizes it quicker.
And how long does it take him to get out?
It depends. Sometimes within inside of a blink of an eye, sometimes it takes, about 10 minutes of working through it.
And how long before mind models would he be in judgment?
Oh, frick. Days, years.
Entire years were wasted.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, seriously. Days, years. Okay, that one is like that. That's, hey, take a note of the time on this one. I want to use this. May I use it? Well, it's out there in the world. It's public domain right now. So there we go. So anyway, yeah, that's amazing. And that's normal, actually. That whole thing of getting it to a blink of an eye, like seconds or almost instantaneous in and out, to minutes. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but for me, it's rare for me to be stuck in something like even for an hour. It's like, it's just like I can be stuck having conversations with other people that haven't figured stuff out for an hour. But for me personally, being stuck in one place for an hour for a long period of time on judgment versus evaluation, it's very, very rare. Like that's not a common state. So it's about being resourceful. And that's one of those key pieces that I wanted to talk to people about, is the fact that mind models are about that third piece. It's not coping, it's not problem solving, and it's not figuring out a solution. It's about figuring out how to figure out solutions. And that's resourcefulness.
Yeah, it's kind of like an awareness that you don't have to tolerate it. You've got this whatever, and because you've got these tools, you don't have to tolerate that going on. You can change it, and that the ability to change things at will. It's like a superpower.
It really is. It is like a superpower. You get to control yourself. You put yourself back in control. Okay. Tim, what have you noticed with the mind models?
Well, and going along with what you were saying, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is the resourcefulness. Whereas before, I was finding myself stuck a lot. A lot like John was saying, I had a hard time with judgment. My biggest thing was I would come up against frustration, overwhelm, when I was, attempting to do something, and I would find myself stuck or up against a barrier, and I did not know how to get myself resourceful.
Right.
I didn't have a process or a flow. I was kind of bouncing between the past future loop of, okay, I've been here before, it didn't work, so I just kind of threw my hands in the air, gave up on it, and never, pushed forward to, whatever goal or a result that I was trying to achieve. I just kind of give up on it.
Right.
And then it threw me into the why loop of judgment and just a whole bunch of self-beating, beating myself up. And it was just this vicious circle that I was going through. And now since I found the mind models, I have been able to get myself resourceful. I've been able to use the what's working, what's not working, and what might I do now, and walk myself through a questioning process to figure out how to get myself resourceful and move around that barrier or block that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
I still deal with the judgment, kind of like John was saying. I struggle with that one a little bit, but it is improving.
This is not like mindset is supposed to hold you in this great mindset where you just don't have problems. Mind models, that's not something that I claim. That's not something that I say is reasonable. People will go in and out of times and moments in their life where things are effective and ineffective for themselves. Okay. But it's all about recovery. So that's the big thing. Recovery pieces is the issue. And Connie, you said it best, like when I asked you and John, like, how long does it take for him to get out? And you said if between a blink of an eye and, maybe 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Well, and when I said before, mind model training, how long? And days, a year, frick, whatever, like it was a long time. So, hey, Rebecca, nice to see you too. I'm just wondering, how long for you, Tim, how long does it take for you to get unstuck and back in and resourceful?
It's usually within a matter of minutes. I mean, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. And
I'm able to kind of walk myself.
Go ahead, say it.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I'm able to kind of walk myself through that questioning process and, and figure out what's working, what's not working, what might I do now, and bring myself to the now and actually, figure a way around whatever it is I'm stuck. And it usually takes, like I said, with 5-10 minutes of walking myself through that questioning process.
Exactly. Rebecca, can you chat too?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Okay. So how long do you find him? Is what he's saying fairly accurate for you too?
Yeah, I would actually say depending on what it is that he's stuck on, it's actually less time. It really just depends on what it is that he's got in his mind, how far into his Y loop he's stuck into before
right.
he pulls himself out. I'd say 3 to 5 is probably pretty accurate.
Nice. And that's like an uncommon thing that you find in the world where mindset, it's not working that way. And you notice how you just have to think about using it and then put it in play and it starts work, like mind models work for you? Is that what you're finding? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I find myself all the time going, oh man, this isn't working. And, and kind of finding myself going into that Y loop. And then all of a sudden I go, oh, wait a minute. I know how to get out of here. And,
right.
and it's becoming more and more and more effective as I go along. The other thing that I have noticed, just to say, is my language pattern. I feel has improved.
What specifically about your language pattern do you see as having improved?
Well, specifically words that I was using a lot of Y.
Right.
Just good, bad, wrong, a lot of those judgment words.
Yeah.
Try was a big one. Now I'm using attempt a lot more. Just a lot of words.
The difference between try and attempt?
Try was more like goal and result for me. The difference there. I mean, you talk about reaching a goal, but a lot of times there's been so many goals that we've set and not achieved that goal just really isn't effective. It doesn't. It kind of brings up negative emotions.
Right.
Whereas results, I have it brings positivity. It brings something to look forward to. I'm working towards a specific result. It just doesn't have that negative connotation, I guess. Is the same thing with try. I mean, try kind of put me in that, you know, try is kind of one of those, well, you know, I guess I'll give it a shot. It just doesn't really have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, just not a lot of motivation, a lot of positivity, inspiration behind it. Whereas attempt builds that, you know, it gives you that self, it's empowering. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
Okay. So does try leave you in, do you notice this? I'm just going to throw this one out. It's a pre-failure word.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like
that's the way I wanted to describe it. Thank you.
It's like pre-failure. Like, I'll try, but because I'm trying, I really don't expect to succeed.
Well, it's because you really can't try. I mean,
Right.
they're you know, yeah. So it just sets that failure right off the bat.
Yeah. Yoda said it best. Do or do not. There is no try.
Right. Right. And it's the same thing with goal, you know, it brings that same feeling, whereas the result is empowering. It just changes the way you look at it.
And it actually is externally verifiable, whereas goals are like playing horseshoes and hand grenades. It doesn't necessarily get you further along. It may, but it may not. But most of the time it doesn't. So you're more prepared for failure because it's a goal, and you let it slide because it's a goal, rather than what is the result that you want, and firming that up.
The other thing that I've noticed with my language pattern is I'm a lot more specific. I still kind of struggle for the right words to be specific because I am really used to being very general. My language is very general. And Rebecca gave me a lot of grief all the time because she's very specific. And I am very general. And so I've noticed that I've become more specific in my language lately. The way I describe things, the way I still kind of looking for the right words here and there, but I noticed that I'm a lot more specific than I was before.
Nice. Good.
So,
very.
Those are some other things that I've noticed. My language pattern has I feel has improved. Excellent.
Good. David, I know you're driving right now. I can see you sideways. Thank you. Now you're leveled out. Perfect. So you were a client for a while with me. So what were the things that the language patterns that you noticed shifted? Or are you back? This is the first.
There's a lot of things that have shifted for me. Specifically, I would say what's working a lot for me right now is the evaluation part. I think what I used to do was I would work a lot and just keep working towards a goal and not really evaluating whether I'm going the right direction, not really evaluating whether it's effective or not. So now I evaluate a lot more often.
Cool.
And that's been very effective for me. So I see myself achieving new results faster than I used to, and also duplicating that to my team so they are getting their results too.
Awesome. That's great to hear. That's huge to hear. So no, that's perfect. So anyway, Trevor, any comments for yourself here?
Sure. I would say probably if I was to just boil it down, mind models have given me reliable processes that I can go back to when I'm stuck, and they're simple. And I can use them to shift myself. So whether it's evaluation or effective versus ineffective or any of the other mind models, it's always something that I can go back to, and they tend to be the most reliable group of thought processes that I always go back to for figuring stuff out and shifting myself and giving myself new perspectives and helping myself move forward with whatever it is.
Cool. Oh, well done. So learning, being open to learn, what are some of the things that you guys have learned about yourselves from mind models? So actually, I'll start with David if you heard that one. So what have you learned about yourself? What's a new discovery that you've learned as a result of having the mind models in your life?
It helped me to learn what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are, and to focus and really identify what I'm really good at and what sets me apart from other people. And
Awesome.
And to put myself in positions so that it would really capitalize on my strengths.
Cool. Cool. Tim, same question.
For me, it's honestly I would have to say the biggest piece is self-confidence.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I did not have a lot of self-confidence before learning the mind models, and since learning them, my self-confidence has improved. And it's mostly, like I say, because I have been able to, where I was stuck before, I've been able to work around them, and that is empowering. So that has helped build my self-confidence.
So if you had to go back pre-mind models and awareness of mind models and put a number on where your self-confidence was and where it is now, yeah.
I was a 2
Okay.
before. That's the number that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I would have to say the number that comes to mind now is 7.
Nice. Rebecca, would you concur?
I'd give it a little bit more like an 8. And again, it's situational, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So 2 to an 8, 2 to a 7. Interesting.
It's externally verifiable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's part of me asking these questions and trying to get it, because self-confidence is an observable behavior. You can see somebody who has it. You also know when somebody doesn't have it. So it's got to be observable. And if you can't make these into observable shifts in a person's life, it's all between your ears. And if it's just all here, then it's a belief, and you can believe you're better, but not behave more effectively. And if you're not being able to behave more effectively, are you actually more effective? You know, that's the bit that, again, I wanted to design mind models so that they are externally verifiable and that they get real world results, not going out there and just staying stuck, you know, on the same old thing or talking yourself into being better. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to have it be I want to almost say a figment of my imagination where I'm trying to con myself into believing that I should feel better and be better than I am. I need to know where I am, because you don't succeed by pretending. You succeed by being successful, not by pretending to be successful. So, John and Connie, same question.
Go for it.
Well, I'm gonna have to echo both David and Tim. The confidence piece, I've just lost it. What did David was David talking about? So strengths. So the awareness. The big lesson is the awareness of focusing on strengths and strengthening strengths rather than trying to strengthen weaknesses. I spent a lot of time trying to strengthen weaknesses. And kind of raise everything up, and that didn't support greater self-confidence either. And I believe I've got this right. It's the confidence and self-confidence is not a versus. That's one of the mind models that there's two, but it's an and, because it's almost a feedback loop. That's what I'm discovering about it, is that I feel self-confident, but then I test that against the world. Am I actually getting feedback that's confirming this? And when I am, then that boosts my self-confidence more. And so there's this nice positive feedback loop there.
Well, it's about building things that are effective and externally verifiable. Yeah. And because it's externally verifiable, I
It's
found
real.
like it's very hard for people to bullshit themselves at the end of the day. Like, you know, I used to work with people in life skills that would try and pump themselves up and tell me how good they are, yet they were pre-suicidal. Like they had tons of mental health issues, and being suicidal was one of them. So, I mean, those people are just telling themselves a story temporarily. But once you break that down into identifying externally verifiable factors and things that that person has actually done that are effective, that are not an opinion, that are observable, and somebody else can turn around and show them, this is what you did, it's sort of hard for them to deny their own effectiveness. And when you start realizing that I can be effective, like Tim said it like 2 or 3 or 4 times here already, it's empowering, but it becomes that empowerment gets refocused into self-confidence, self-worth, self-esteem, and starts building real possibility thinking for an individual to go out there and live their life differently. And John, that's like, you know, and Tim, both of you. John, I saw sort of transform here, like on these Tuesday evenings. And Tim, I met you in person and heard what your story was, saw what happened. And I keep on seeing incremental improvements week over week. And that's so comfortable, and how cautious you were, and how you would sort of sit back, and Rebecca would sort of take the front and be leading the charge. And now it's okay, we can play off each other. And, you know, it's sort of cool because it's way more balanced than, you know, than it used to be, where Rebecca was out in front and you were, you know, in the background sort of watching things. And now it's balanced. What, is that accurate, Tim? Or
I feel it has become more balanced.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's totally balanced in every situation.
Yeah, I was going to say there's still a lot of areas that Becky leads the charge.
I agree, but that's not the point. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is practice accepting feedback. Is that to some degree more accurate now than it was before?
More accurate, yes.
Great. I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm saying moving in a direction. Do you see that direction as being effective for you?
Yes.
Great. That's all I'm saying. Thank you. Is that externally verifiable?
Yes, it is.
And does it help balance out your relationship?
Yes.
And that was a yes with a question mark. What's the...
I say yes hesitantly, because there are still a lot of areas. Well, again, there's a lot of areas I still have to improve.
Excuse me, but there's a lot of areas that I still have to improve on.
Oh my.
Yeah, exactly. It's called life. It literally is life. You're never done. There is no end to this. So, you know, so maybe one of the learning opportunities for what might be a learning opportunity for you with this right now. And remember, tonight's topic is be open to learn.
Well, to take external feedback.
And?
Also to, I guess, step up and lead more of the charge.
Potentially, yeah. But let's just stick with the first part, to take external feedback. Let's do a compare and contrast bit. Where were you before? Where are you now in terms of give yourself a number before and give yourself a number now in terms of your overall effectiveness of being able to step up and be more on an, instead of being in the background, being, okay, I can be more or less on par.
You want my self-evaluation?
Yeah, I want your self-evaluation because I want to see how reasonable it appears from my vantage point of a person at a distance from you. Is it externally verifiable? Is that accurate? Because we have to learn how to view ourselves the way that other people view us, not just how we want to view ourselves. Because how we want to view ourselves is almost always the least accurate view. But if we can disassociate ourselves and start seeing how others might view us, that's a closer approximation to how we actually are. And the most effective approximation is getting feedback from others directly.
So may I ask you a question, Blair?
Yeah, please, fire away.
So I guess I'm seeing a big question mark in my mind. And the reason behind that is it was situational. Previously, I kind of, I stepped back, I let others take the charge until it got to a certain point, until I got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore or something wasn't working. And then I snapped, so to speak, and then I would completely take charge. Yep. So
what motivated you to take charge in those situations? What emotion would you describe or attribute that to?
Frustration is the one that comes to mind.
Yep, exactly. I'd call it that way, but the snapping point is when frustration turned into anger.
Yes.
Because I'd argue that you were probably frustrated earlier, but when that was turning into
reached a tipping point.
Reach that tipping point where that frustration is going to cause you to really explode. You have a vent point right just before then, but it's still on the angry side, but a lot of frustration and some anger rather than just furious.
Okay.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. So that's good. That's your old you.
Right.
Okay. Now where are you? And where would you put that on a scale of effectiveness for yourself?
The number that comes to my mind is 4.
Okay. Good.
And now I would say 7 or 8.
So if it's an 8, that's a 100% increase in your capacity, a doubling of your effectiveness. Is that an accurate description?
I'm leaning more towards the 7 than the 8, but I
understand
would definitely.
That, but I'm going, you're approaching then, another way of framing it is saying that you're approaching being twice as effective as you were. You're still far from perfect because that last 20% can be 80% of your work using the Pareto principle and all.
Right.
Okay, so you can still have to kick in a lot. And the closer you get to perfection, the more and more and more and more work you have to do. And the funny thing is, the simpler you have to make it. It's not about making things more complex as you gain in clarity. It's about simplifying it so that you can see a finer slice, a thinner piece. I'm back into woodworking. I love woodworking. And one of the things that I just was watching a YouTube video before I came on here, and it was a guy that he teaches woodworking. The guy's a frickin' engineer. He's brilliant. He's got a math brain. I don't have a strong math brain, but he went out and said, take a look at this piece of paper. He shook it. This is a little bit thicker than normal piece of paper, right? And he said, you can look at the edge of this piece of paper and you can see that this piece of paper, you can see physically see the edge of this piece of paper. And he said, that is the thickness of 3/1000ths of an inch, that edge. So your eye can see 3/1000ths of an inch. In fact, it can see far finer than that. It can see almost an edge that's like 1/1000th of an inch or slightly less. In fact, 0.5 of an inch. And your fingers can feel the difference, by the way, as well, too. So, because you can run your finger over a crack and recognize, or the level of two pieces, and recognize something is out. And if you measure that, it can really sense like 0.5 of an inch. I don't know what a 10,000th is, how to express that, but it's a very thin amount. And it's like half of a human hair, because you can feel a human hair. And that's like 2 to 3/1000ths of an inch. Again, thick. So you can feel that. My point being is that we are accurate. Like our brains can start seeing things when we see what's available to us. We can start measuring the differences. And as we go forward and simplify, we have to simplify to things that we know. So we take a look at this and go, this piece of paper here has an edge to it. And that edge that you see in that type of paper that I just held up is probably about 2/1000ths of an inch, because it's not the slightly thicker paper that's, really good stuff that you write on for nice letters or whatever. This is just regular bond. And that's around 2/1000ths of an inch. And that subtle difference is, do you start acknowledging that your brain can see that difference? And can you simplify it down to saying, oh, this is a thick piece of paper, this is slightly thinner, or this is onion skin, because onion skin is somewhere around 1/1000ths or slightly less. And you can see the difference in those. But if you categorize it and say onion skin, regular bond, or good quality writing paper, it's 1,000, 2,000, 3/1000ths of an inch. And your eye and your senses can know that. So these subtle differences can be said complicated, thousandths of an inch, or onion skin paper, tracing paper, whatever you want to call it, regular bond paper, or thick, good writing paper. Those three things you can see, you can feel, you can touch, and they're simple to understand. And you allow yourself to move along, but you've got to frame it in a way that you can trust yourself. And if it's like, oh, this is 2/1000ths of an inch, right, I can put that right up to the crack on my desk and feel the difference and go, man, that paper raised up is now slightly higher than the other side of the desk. But without it, the other side of the desk is higher than the paper. And it's about half that distance. So it's about 1/1000th of an inch that is off in height. And you can do it. I can do it just by feeling and going, that's how I can have these simple tests and trust myself to know what's real and what's just an idea or a thought. But you define these things, you name and label them in simple terms. And the paper thicknesses was amazingly simple, I thought, and gives me way more confidence in my ability to trust myself in making these fine measurements accurately. That's what we have to do with our feelings too. These are fine tools, fine sensory tools to cause us to shift subtly so that we can align precisely and make perfect 45s and perfect alignments. So every joint aligns perfectly and it becomes very, very strong. But if we don't give ourselves permission to evaluate ourselves precisely and simply, if we're always holding back and saying, you know what, I don't feel like I'm quite on with this. I'm still off. More because you're used to being off rather than being accurate. Okay? So don't slide into that one. And that's one where, you know, how Rebecca, Tim, was always refining and seeing it differently than you see it, giving you slightly more credit. It's because you're used to seeing yourself off, less effective.
Right.
People who see themselves more effective tend to raise themselves above and then somebody else, because they'll be generous with their number. But people who see themselves as habitually being less effective over time have to find a way to get it into the middle. And being able to see it and align that, and just a quick little skill testing process here for the two of you to do is just to say, okay, Rebecca, I think you'd give me an 8 here, or a 7, or whatever it is. Is that accurate? And just see what she has to say. Don't think about it as but what I'd give myself. Think about it what she'd give me. Because then you can get out of your own way. Yeah,
Right.
John, you too.
Yeah, this is like looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
Tim, we're on the same page, buddy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was like killing two birds with one stone, and I'm sure Brent and Jackie can get some benefit from this conversation. Most people can, because this is where we're off with ourselves, and this is how I personally recalibrate with Melissa, my partner, my wife. And we do this is I just ask her, you know, like I don't have to tell her where I think I am. I ask her how she sees me. And sometimes I don't like the answer because I'm higher. And sometimes I love the answer because she gives me a more accurate reading and it's higher than I do. And I also go to school on that, by the way, on both directions. Because what am I missing when I'm giving myself a high number and she gives me one that's a little lower? What is the difference? And sometimes it was just talking through it and getting those meanings to align. And the meanings are the same, but the calibration of the number was different because her scale was slightly bigger than mine. So it was off. But in a marriage, you're constantly recalibrating to each other. And that's what it's all about. And once you get it aligned, it's great for a while. It's never perfect and it's never forever. It goes out again. And then it's about recalibrating. And the calibration is just, hey, where do you see me? And in the early days, it was, what do you love about me? You know, like that's what I wanted to know. And I would ask Melissa that. And she'd ask me. And then we'd share, you know, what she loved about me and what I loved about her. How come? Because it's really easy then to know what to do so the other person finds you lovable. I always found it difficult because Melissa sees me as cute and adorable. I don't get it. Okay. She gets it. Like, trust me, I totally get that. But I am starting to, at my age, realize that I've got moments where I actually view myself as cute and adorable-ish, but more handsome sometimes. I've got elements of that. But I always had that issue about self-image and aligning my self-image with her perception of myself, with her perception of me. Because she sees me through a different pair of eyes. And she needs glasses. No, I'm kidding about that. But no, she sees me through a different pair of eyes. And those eyes are accurate from her perspective. And to align, I need to understand what she sees and how she sees it. And more specifically, what my behaviors are that she sees. So I can just simply do more of those things. And she can feel like I love her. And yeah, and enjoy it. So that was basically that. So How did that work for you guys tonight? I mean, I know we're sort of going through a bunch of different things. We're learning to learn. We're learning to where we can learn from, and we can learn from each other, and we can learn from ourselves. But we can't learn from each other or ourselves if we don't evaluate ourselves fairly. We wind up making judgments, and we state that we're right or wrong, good or bad, and those are all judgmental. And we want to avoid that, like we said before, and we want to be effective, not ineffective. And so we want to ask questions. What have I done that is effective for you so far? And this evening, what have I done in terms of a quick wrap up here? What's been effective for you? Okay, John, what's been effective? Then John and Connie, because we've got the two of you there, and then Tim and Rebecca. And then Trevor gets the second last word.
Well, what you just said just was kind of falling into place for me. The whole thing about being open to learning. Yeah, we're not muted. About being open to learning was that evaluation. You know, when it is evaluation and not judgment, it maintains that openness. There's a feeling of safety there. You know, it's just, you know, I've been trying to use this instead of fail, it's miss. You know, like if I go to the shooting range and I'm aiming my pistol at a target, I either hit the bullseye or I don't. But, you know, so I either hit it or I miss. But there's no failure.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you know, that's where the evaluation versus judgment falls for me. So this is just hugely.
And how to then correct, because you can figure out a way to get your sighting back on target.
Yes, because when you're focused on the evaluation process, there's kind of an implied question of you know, where was I headed, and how, and this is where I got, and this is where I was headed. What's different? Whereas in the judgment process, it's, you know, you're focused more on getting away from the judgment.
Right, which is you're stupid, you're dumb, you didn't do it right, you're a bad person, as opposed to none of that exists in evaluation. You're not good or bad. It's just, did you get what you wanted? Yes or no? And if you didn't, what might you do differently? That's it. It's
Well, for me, the thing tonight was goals versus results.
Okay.
And the word try. I was amazed at the word try, how much frustration was underneath that word.
Yes.
And that I was using it as a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I've tried that, you know, but being more result oriented, that's much more positive. And so, you know, that whole New Year's Eve goals and things for the year, you know, we all do that with inside of 20 minutes after making them, you know, type of thing. Yeah. So, but results oriented is giving me, and I can't, a target, maybe a clearer target is a better word for it.
You know, one of the ways that I describe goals, it's like playing horseshoes and hand grenades. And what I describe results, like working towards your result, is playing darts. Because they have wire around on the dartboard, it's wires that separate every single area. If you are on that line, your dart does not go in because it hits the wire and it bounces off.
Right.
So you're either in that area that you were shooting for or not.
Right.
You know, that's it. Either a different area or the correct area.
Right.
If it's there, it's either effective or it's ineffective.
Right.
And it gives a really, really specific alignment of what works or what doesn't work. Right. And that's how come I love results.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, cool. Okay, Tim, what did you get?
Well, for me, I'm going to go back to the beginning where we were talking about the mind is like a parachute. It works better when it's open. I love that. That was big. As far as I have felt that over the last, oh man, what has it been since June, basically, when I found the mind models. I mean, I feel like it's a big sponge. And this, you know, the topic tonight of being open to learn, I've learned so much over the last few months about myself, about mind models, about how to get myself resourceful, you know, and how to bring myself out of a why loop. It just, anyway, I loved what you said at the beginning about the mind's a parachute. It works better when it's open, because before, I will fully admit, my parachute wasn't open. And I spent a lot of time, you know, closed off, and until, like I said, where it get to a point where I would just pop, you know, and then suddenly I was just on. And now that parachute's open, and I'm absorbing, I'm able to get myself resourceful. And I feel like with the whole self-confidence and everything, I am empowered. So.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'd ask Rebecca, but she's obviously dealing with your kids.
Yeah, sorry. We had our daughter started having
no worries. No worries.
A meltdown.
I'm a parent. I've been there. Not there now, but I've been there. Trevor.
Just seeing what everybody has pulled from mind models and what's been most important and effective to them. It was interesting to see everyone's perspective and relate it back to myself, and gave me different things to search for as well, to see if it was working for me the same way.
So how was it working for you? Was it working for you similarly?
Yeah, in pretty much all cases, even though people were saying different things, it's like, oh yeah, that works for me too.
Yeah, that relates. Interesting. So over the last 10 weeks, we had the first week on this 10 beliefs. Time has nothing to do with change. And that whole myth of it takes time to change is sort of been blown up and blown out of here. So we've sort of dispelled that one and go, we can change, not instantly, but within moments. And we just have to figure out that what we're doing is ineffective, and then ask ourselves some questions. What might I do differently, and test that. And so it may take a few iterations of asking that question and evaluating yourself to be able to realize, to make an effective change. But you guys are testimony to the fact that where, like John, and especially what Connie said earlier around, you know, how long did it take for John to change? Well, he can change in a blink of an eye, and maybe at the long side, like 10 minutes. And before, it was days. No, frick, years, you know, of being stuck. You know, like, yeah, if you don't have mind models, you can't make those changes, and you can't make them identifiably, repeatably, and duplicatably, and speed. The whole thing that I keep on hearing that is, I think, I'm not, you know, Trevor, I think one of the things that we can talk about in marketing mind models is quite literally the speed of change. That you, how fast, like, do you want to stay stuck for years, days, weeks, you know, or do you want seconds to minutes? Because that's honestly my experience and the experience of most people I've taught. But again, we have people that are just picking up on mind models, not going through one of the full-blown courses, but just one of them. And boom, that's it. It's like mind models work fast. That's it. That's really what it comes down to. Be clear on what you want. And when you're clear on what you want, you can get it. And so going after clarity rather than certainty is a big game changer. Focus on what you can control or influence, not what you hope to have or want to have, but on what you can do, and start moving in the direction of where you want to go, but focus on what you can control or influence. Clarity is a questioning process. It's not a telling process. It's a process of asking questions. And all three of you that are still on the call here we're going through quite literally all of, like, questioning. You guys went from telling, like John, you went from telling me a story about your problems to asking questions so you can get resourceful. And that's like it in like months ago when I first met you to now. So, and Tim, similarly, like it was actually, you weren't even telling, you were sitting back, mouth shut, listening and waiting to try, and I'm going to put it crudely here, but waiting to try and pick a hole in it. It is like, you know, like you were judging, but that quietly judging, thank God, but you were still judging. And now you started applying and you see the difference, you feel the difference, and you're doing the difference, and you're questioning, which is seeking clarity, not telling me how it's supposed to be or telling yourself how it should be. So should sort of out. Number 6.
Yeah, no should and could.
No should and could, yeah. Understand yourself and your strengths. You're still working on that, Tim. You know, like while both you and John are still working on your strengths, understanding yourself and your strengths. But my God, you've both come a huge distance. And you too, Connie. You're starting to recognize your own strengths. And in doing so, you're on to number 7, which is develop your skills, which is practice the mind models, develop them, but see where your strengths are and work on those things. Don't work on your weaknesses like you were saying before, John. Lead the charge. Don't wait to others for others to act. You start leading the charge. And well done on all of you guys here. Keep your commitments to yourself. The promise made is a promise kept. And it's also got to be kept to yourself. Like you got to make, if you make yourself a promise and say, this is what I'm going to do, then by golly, figure out a way to go do it. Okay. And keep working on it. Because if it's important enough to make it a promise to yourself, then make it important enough to figure out a way to do it and get yourself resourceful and create clarity by questioning, and you'll figure it out. And lastly today was be open to learn, because that's how you get everything in life, is by being open to learn. And you guys are all learners. Like on the call here, you guys are learners, and that makes a difference. Okay, with that, I want to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for being on tonight. We're going to be moving on to a new area next week. So new stuff, not more of the same, but moving back into mind models specifically. So that's going to be an exciting time. So I'll, Trevor, if there's anything else you'd like to say?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, then I guess thank you very much for attending, and you guys take care, and we'll see you guys all next week.
See you then.
Adios.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Bye for now.